Howdy, Ken Cook here, Prepared Marketing, sitting down with Dave Boxley of Dave Boxley Sales Management. Today we're going to talk a little bit about lead management. Lead management's a big thing for a lot of small business owners. I think, in here we struggle with it. I see a lot of our clients struggling with it. How do you go about dealing with lead management and really helping small businesses get a handle on the leads they already have?
Well, it's a great question because it's actually essential to productivity within a small business. If you think about what's going on in your business and in most small businesses, is a premium is on time and money, but you don't have in most small businesses excess people lying around who can go out and figure out who the best lead should be. It has to be done organically within the group of people that you have already on staff. For me, I'll just tell you my process and then love to hear more from you as far as yours. It starts for me as in an area of identifying who that ideal prospect is. I know this is an overused term. You go to any networking event, they're going to ask, who's your ideal prospect? Well, my ideal prospect is a small business owner who has, generally speaking, fewer than 10 sales representatives and who does not have a sales manager. It's a guy whose business is growing, viable, but is not yet generating enough revenue to pay for a qualified sales manager. And by qualified, I mean somebody who's got the experience and the expertise. He has best practices he can bring in from outside the company in order to accentuate what's already going on in the sales process and also accelerate it forward, generate more revenue. And the small business owner would love to do that, but he can't. And so that's really who I target as far as my ideal lead. Now, how do I figure out who those people are? In person, it's generally relatively easy. I go to a lot of networking events. Matter of fact, I met you at a networking event. And engaging in conversations and asking good questions and just dialoguing like we do at networking events, you start to uncover different things that are going on in a business. And one of them might be that, hey, I'm swamped. I need some more time in my schedule to do bigger things, but I don't have a sales manager. That's an ideal prospect for me. I'll take that card every time and I'll follow up with that person in an automated way, generally using a software like Infusionsoft or something along those lines. The other way that I look for leads when I find them online, I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. Another thing I just thought about, LinkedIn is a fantastic way to build a silent salesperson for you nowadays. A lot of people are online. It's something that I'm learning every day, but LinkedIn is a great place to find people. But whether I find them on LinkedIn, in person, or just through a variety of other methods online, whether that be a Chamber of Commerce list or things such as that, LinkedIn becomes my first source as far as finding out how many employees, estimated employees a company has, because most companies with salespeople, those salespeople, if nobody else, are on LinkedIn. And so you can get a pretty good gauge of, are there salespeople online? I also look to see, are there any vice presidents in the company? If there's a vice president of sales, that's probably not a good prospect for me. Once again, back to that question about time. I don't want to spend any time chasing a company where they already have a vice president of sales in place. That's unlikely they're going to need my services. Yeah. And if they do, and it entails getting rid of a vice president who's already in place, I don't want to be involved in that mess either. So that's generally speaking how I at least start qualifying the leads that I have. And also, actually, you know what? I'm not going to add any also. I'd like to know actually how you approach the same question, because I'd love to hear from the marketing perspective.
So I think we do it somewhat similar, but also somewhat differently, right? I mean, sales is sales. For us, though, it starts with that building of that ideal client, what we would call a marketing avatar, right? We want to build a name, a face, more details about this person so that we can reach more people like them, whether that's through lookalike audiences on Facebook or whether that's through branding exercises, etc. And how do we speak to that person most ideally? That's one of the big pieces I think that we, from a marketing perspective, are really going after. Within the prepared marketing sales reality, though, I think we do a lot of the same things that you do, in that I'm really looking at, where does this company sit? Are they growing or are they shrinking? Because we work with both, but we try to do different things. What's their real need? And one of the big ones for me, honestly, is how open is this person to learning? One of the big things I've found is companies where the owner, president, whoever we're working with, is not open to learning new things. That's a company we just don't work well with. We're really passionate about education and really driving new ideas and new concepts into people's businesses, and also experimentation. One of the things we're getting a big sign made to put up on the office wall here: anything worth doing is worth doing poorly. We've actually sent that to clients.
He told me that quote.
And I love this concept. It was originally written, I mean, there's dozens of people who've said that or a variation of that. I first read it from Al Reese and Jack Trout in their book Positioning. But this idea of if it's worth doing, you shouldn't be waiting to do it. If it's not worth doing, you shouldn't do it, right? So if it is worth doing, do it now and do it badly. If we can get that cultural shift to occur in an organization and get a group really behind this idea of testing and trial and experimentation, that's where we, from a marketing perspective, really see big wins. Because I'll take an example of a current client. They gave us an ad set of 15 images, right? 2 years ago when we started, they gave us 3. Now we've not only ballooned the number of images that we're looking at, but before they had one list of people. This year they've been giving us monthly lists of 14 different sets of people. And what that means is we're granularly targeting with different messages. We're experimenting, we're testing, we're saying what images in general work, and now how does that backflow into your branding, right? What sets of information really connect with your customers? And that's all through this learning, testing piece. So that's something that we really, as part of our qualification process, regardless of the money, of anything else, we're looking as a piece for us that if you're not interested in that kind of a reality, you're not a good fit for this place. If you're not interested in data and numbers and metrics, you're not a good fit, right? So there's certain pieces that we see that we just say, this is part of a good fit for us. And I think that's where, when we're looking at lead management, it's understanding how do I codify those, what we would call unstructured pieces of data, and say in a ones and zeros kind of world, they do or they do not fit. That's for me the biggest piece. And I think that's also, for people who aren't more naturally inclined to do sales, I think that's the biggest challenge, right? Is how do I take that really unstructured, there's no way for me, if I go up to someone and say, do you like learning? They're not typically saying no, right? No one's admitting, I hate reading, right? I've had people who you'll hand them a book and they'll never read it, but they'll never say to your face, oh, I hate reading. How you discover those intangible truths, I think, are unique both to the person and the company, but I think that it's also part of that process. It's got to be, well, these are the questions we're asking, and here's a set of acceptable answers, and here's a set of unacceptable answers. We did this when we were hiring a marketing assistant. We did a bunch of interviews, and we asked certain questions, and there were certain ways that if you answered a question, we wrote that person off simply because of the way they answered a question. We said, this is no-go territory. Now what's funny about that is one of the best employees I've ever hired, he gave some of the worst answers I've ever seen in an interview. I mean, like I told Derek afterwards, we are not hiring that guy. And he's like, well, you should really think about that. And that's where it's process first and then exceptions. And I think what so many small businesses are doing is saying, here's all my exceptions and here's my process.
That's an interesting point.
And I think that if we can get process, and that's why as a marketing company, we're so intent on pushing automated software, so intent on pushing things that are going to force you to define process. The reality is marketing automation does more to grow a business by defining its process than it does by truly automating something.
That's very interesting then as far as that.
I mean, because that's what happens is you've got this company that's floating out there that has no process whatsoever, and you're saying, okay, it's time for us to build your process.
What's next?
What's next?
What's next? What's next? We heard a good friend of ours named Colin this week talk about this as far as a process. Yep. Always be asking, what's the next step? What's the next step? And so we're kind of aligned in this entire thing. I find it very interesting as far as the automation part of the lead, not generation, but the lead qualification, it sounds like, is that you come to a crossroads, so to speak. And for you, you're essentially, if I heard you right, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you're essentially saying, okay, here's my process. They all get up to this crossroads. Once they get to the crossroad, they take the wrong path, they're out of the process. However, once you've gone through that entire route of the process, then you take a look at the people that you spun off, it sounds like, or kicked out or disqualified, and you say, now we disqualified this person, this business, for this particular reason. Now that we've gone through this entire process and we see what the rest of our leads look like, are there people who are exceptions to the process that we think actually, because of what we've learned about them or we learned about the process, let's go back and take a second look at them.
I think so. I think one of the, so here's, we had a client a couple years ago. We had a sales process in place. It was automated through Infusionsoft. It was driving people through. And this person we kept kicking them out. And they'd sign up for another lead magnet. And they'd start through the process again. Over and over and over until I finally said to myself, I really need to sit down and understand, one, either is this person just consuming content to consume content, or have I missed something in the process where this is actually a really good lead, but when I set this up, I didn't realize it. And for us, it was really the latter. It was, this is a great lead, and we weren't smart enough to see it at the time. And so we were kicking them out, and that's part of that refinement of branding and messaging and really refinement of target to say, is this the right person for us?
In that particular case, if you remember, it sounds like you might.
Yeah.
What did you do with your process after that recognition?
So we adjusted it to open it a little bit wider.
Okay.
Is I think so when you look at things that are absolute, we're not following up with this person, right? We all make those business decisions. I'm not following up with this person anymore. I think a lot of times that happens on accident. There are times where that happens intentionally, though. When that's happening intentionally, the question, and they're coming back into your funnel again, you have to ask a really hard, long why. Why is this person coming back in when I've already intentionally cut them out? When we've got, or even more common, I think in our case, was we'd get someone to a proposal, they'd never sign it, they'd time out of that proposal, and it would sit, and then they would come back in and re-engage. In fact, we've got a client right now who our normal engage to signed contract and start work is less than 30 days typically.
Okay.
This person, I think their engage to sign contract and start work was close to 150 days. So much so that Derek repeatedly told me they're never going to sign a contract. And I said, no, I got to keep working this one.
You just had a gut feel.
You have a little bit of a gut feel. You see things in the company that says, this person isn't blowing me off because they're saying no. They're blowing me off because they genuinely can't deal with us right now.
Now, this actually could open up an entirely different dialogue about why do people buy. I've been reading a lot of papers from a particular writer who has created or coined over the course of the last 30 years something called buyer facilitation. The woman's name is Sharon Drew Morgan. And her thesis is no one can buy anything until they've handled all of the change management stuff that's going on behind the scenes in their own company. And a lot of that change management is stuff that we can't necessarily recognize unless we're asking the right questions. Right. And it sounds like this particular thing might have been an example of that. That could be an entirely another dialogue sometime when we're both prepared for it. But it's pretty interesting stuff. And it sounds like you just gave me a perfect example of what could have been one of those. Right.
Well, I also think, I love Danny Ariely. A lot of these behavioral economics guys, I love reading their books. I love everything they talk about. It's just fascinating to me. This idea that people are irrational instead of rational actors, I think, is a big piece of this. I think there's a lot of, I wanted to do this, but I was afraid. Now, I'm willing, right? So, like, how many companies have we worked with, or have I worked with, have you worked with, that you're asking them to spend $3,000 to $5,000 or $10,000, and they say, oh, I don't know, that's pretty crazy. and they turn around and they go buy a new van for $50,000. They're not afraid to spend large sums of money. They're not used to spending large sums of money in certain ways. And I think that what happens is there's this irrational part of the person that like clicks on and says, oh, wait on this, Even though we've answered all the questions, we've established this is good, we've established this is profitable, we've established clear profitability lines and margins and all of that, it all makes sense. But there's still that irrational part of the person I think we have to deal with.
That's an interesting thing, because if you put those two things together, irrational and resistance to change, they might be flip sides of the same coin as you dig into it. This is actually, we're on a new topic now, folks, so tune in for the next episode. But that is kind of a fascinating thing that makes me, giving me something to think about here as far as that goes. So, one thing, to give a rough shift of gears one more time, one thing you said a few minutes ago with regards to you made a gut decision on that guy. Why is this guy coming back? I need to really pursue this a little bit more deeply. Now, one of the premises of this entire thing we've been talking about is we don't want to waste our time. The reason we want to qualify leads is we don't want to waste our time chasing our own tails in this regard. Just to make sure I'm clear on the process, when you decide to make an exception in the process, do you have a way to score that internally as far as, or is it just really a gut feel where sometimes you have to go with your gut?
It's a gut feel. So here's the challenge. If we could score exceptions, they wouldn't be exceptions.
Okay. Touche.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, just the reality is if I could find a way to take, I think, and quantify that on a regular basis, I totally would. In certain places, it's relationship with people. It's how often you see them. It's how often have you known them. Yeah, in this case, this is a person that when our business was probably 3 months old, they hired us to build and set up a new computer for them. Now, we didn't build or set up computers. We're a marketing company, but we needed money, and so we built and set up a computer. It was that kind of a time frame in life, if you will, and so it was looking back at some of the history with that particular person and saying, I'm going to keep pushing this forward. We have a long established history, 5 years plus. I don't think that their mode of saying no to me is the blow off. I think their mode of saying no to me is to say no. And so because of that, I'm going to keep working this lead, even though my process tells me to stop.
Okay, that's fair enough.
And I mean, I don't know that there's but maybe a handful of people on the planet that scenario would ring true again, if that makes sense. But that's why it's an exception, not the rule.
Yeah, and you did answer my question right there, which is that while it was a gut instinct to keep pushing forward, there was also some history with this particular thing. And I guess this is the unanswered question that we're always going to have to be conscientious about is, when do I make an exception?
Right.
And for me, that process, as I think I told you just an hour or so ago, I've just recently gone through and really cleaned up a lot of the leads that I had been working on, simply because I made the call, okay, do these really fit within that ideal prospect that I mentioned at the start of this? Okay, so my point was going to be that I need to make sure I discipline myself as far as the leads that I'm going to go after that are not within that specific area, because there are those exceptions. There are always exceptions. But if I'm going to manage my time properly, I've got to make sure I have a parameter for the exceptions, parameters for the exception, and also a limit to how many of those I am willing to chase at any one particular time.
Well, if everyone becomes an exception, it's no longer exception. It's just bad process.
It's exceptionally stupid.
Yeah,
is what it is. So,
all right. Well, hey, we've been chatting with Dave Boxley, Dave Boxley Sales Management. We can find you at daveboxley.com.
Correct, or at dave@daveboxley.com if you want to email me.
Excellent. Ken Cook, Prepared Marketing. You can find us, preparedmarketing.com. Thanks for tuning in. We look forward to talking to you again soon.